Hello there. How you doing?
Good, and thank you for inviting me on your show. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome. I'm pleased. I'm always so happy to see like a proper microphone and all of that stuff. It's like, oh, this is going to be smooth and nice. So, where are you talking to us from today?
I am in Orlando, Florida.
Okay, cool. That's where they've got like theme parks, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I know about it. So, tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel and what you've been looking into and finding out.
Yeah, so for about the past 4 years, I've been covering UAP or UFOs because on December 16th, 2017, there was a huge article in the New York Times revealing that the American government spent $22 million in tax money to study UAP. It was initiated in 2018 with a UFO program called OSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. And interestingly, OSAP was not just looking into UAP exclusively. They were looking into also paranormal phenomena associated with UAP, such as cattle mutilations and poltergeist activity and things of this nature. So it was a very broad spectrum program. And then that went to about 3 months beyond 2010. So we're talking about 2 years, 3 months. And there was opposition in the Pentagon because there were people who thought it would be bad public relations if the public found out that taxpayer money was going into a program like this. But there were also religious fundamentalists, as at least has been reported, who felt like studying UAP and the associated phenomena would open the public up to the forces of Satan, if you will, because they perceived that this phenomena was satanic. And so the OSAP program, the funding for that desisted, was taken away, but ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, persisted or began basically in 2010, basically never went away. And then recently that morphed into the UAP task force. And now we have a new UAP program, which is arguably the most impressive of them all, officially mandated by the United States Congress. It's called AOIMSG, Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Now, this is an amazing UFO program coming out of the United States government, sanctioned bipartisan support by the American Congress. This effort is going to look into the biological effects that people potentially receive when they come close to these objects, radiation poisoning, what have you. It's going to look into incidences where objects have come into close proximity of nuclear installations, such as ICBM installations and power plants. It's going to have a rapid response team that if there is a UFO incident or a pattern of UFO observation, people will get on the ground and do research into it. It's going to look into the question of whether there actually has been previous legacy efforts looking into back engineering UAPs from crashes or material collection. And it's going to look into the science of how UAP work, the propulsion system, the material science. So basically, we have entered a phase where it's no longer a question of, are UAP real? The U.S. government has unequivocally said they're real. Not real in the sense of, well, they could be weather balloons, or they could be Venus, or they could be a weather phenomenon. No, real as in unknown technology of unknown origin with unknown agenda. So you don't have to have me to tell you that UFOs are real. The U.S. government is telling us all that UFOs are real and that they are a profound mystery, and we really don't know a whole lot about them.
We should just, for the lay people or those sort of passing by and don't know much about the UFO stuff, UAP is unidentified aerial phenomena. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, wow. And why? How did you get into this? Because it sounds like you're very passionate about it, and I suppose we should be if this is being hidden from us. Or is it being hidden from us?
Well, in the close of Project Blue Book in 1969, which was a investigative effort by the Air Force, but it should be noted that Project Blue Book was not insulated from the public, right? We knew about Project Blue Book. OSAP and ATIP were secret and insulated. We did not know about those until 2017. So the Air Force, in my opinion, lied to the public. In the Close of Project Blue book in 1969, they said UAP do not represent any scientific interests. They do not represent a potential national security risk. And that's it. We're done with UAP. But as it turns out, we have learned that there actually were official taxpayer-funded operations within the U.S. government investigating UAP from as early as 2008. Actually, the former head of ATIP, Luis Elizondo, has stated that in a meeting he met someone who said that he had his job in the 80s. So I think it's very likely that OSAP and ATIP are only the tip of the iceberg, and there are other programs ongoing right now, taxpayer funded, potentially in the billions, that are researching and investigating this mysterious phenomena, because the military has an inherent interest. If there are technologies that are in our airspace and in our oceans that are using a completely different kind of technology, or at least it appears that way, they can outmaneuver our best equipment, our best hardware, whether it's an F-18 Hornet or an F-35 or an F-22. Of course, the military is going to want to know how they work so that they can hopefully be able to create technology that replicates their capabilities. So yes, I think it's very important that the United States government is transparent on this mystery, because what's happening, in my opinion, is from all the lies that have been told by the American government and potentially other governments, most likely, because they have sensor collecting mechanisms as well. They have satellites, they have air forces that pick up this data as well. What's happened is we basically live in a false world. We've had the wool pulled over our eyes, in my opinion, because it's just a fact that there are mysterious objects operating in our airspace. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what their agenda is. This should not be something that's relegated to small little pockets in the United States government or small little pockets in other governments. This should be something that the totality of our institutions and our scientific community is looking into to try to get to the bottom of it. This should not be exclusively a military objective and kept from the rest of the world. That's just unethical, in my opinion.
Do you think if they were to discover something that they know for a fact, like this is some alien technology, aliens have been here, are here, that would be the biggest story of all time, wouldn't it? Like in the newspapers and stuff like that. Would that be an exciting day, or do you think it would be hidden from us?
Well, I think they know. I can't prove they know. I can't prove it, but in my opinion, they've collected enough they've collected enough sensor data over the decades through many different platforms, corroborated, whether that's electro-optical or video footage, if you will, or radar data, or collected it from even satellite systems and other probably mechanisms that are classified and we don't even know about. So in my opinion, the United States government has known we are not alone for decades. And it appears we're moving in a direction where that's going to eventually be common knowledge. We're not there yet, but it appears we are moving in that direction. Much more transparency has happened in the past 4 years within the United States government on this issue than every year combined prior to that. If and when it does come out, and if I'm right, because look, I could be wrong about this whole thing. I don't think I am. But if and when it does come out that we are not alone and there are non-human intelligences engaging our species in our airspace and in our oceans, yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest story in human history. And I think it's going to have an incredible impact upon human civilization, our culture, our philosophies, our science, everything. And I think that for whatever reason, and we can speculate why that is, there have been many hypotheses put forward, but for whatever reason, the U.S. government has never really wanted to broach this. It's never really wanted the American public or the world at large to have the discussion. But I think that's wrong. I don't think they're the ones that get to decide or should decide when we have that discussion or if we have that discussion. It's not something that should be classified. Why would you classify a scientific fact about our universe? That's wrong. And I look forward to the day that this comes out in full. Like maybe they'll release a high resolution video that seals the deal, or a bunch of material and evidence that seals the deal. And then we can finally, grow up as a species and have that conversation about a mysterious, unknown presence in our biosphere that we don't know where it comes from and we don't know the agenda. But what we do know is that it's technology that's not stemming from human ingenuity.
And what is it that you've seen that like, what's an example of a couple of things that have been seen where it's like, okay, that is something that's clearly alien technology?
Well, I don't think there's ever been anything that we could consider a smoking gun. Nothing
Right.
that I'm aware of has come out that we could say, oh, that 100% seals the deal. But what I can reference, of course, is the USS Nimitz UFO event series that happened in 2004. What was witnessed, according to the expert witnesses, we're talking, one of them was a Top Gun pilot. So there were two planes, and they were called to check out a mysterious object. And they ended up seeing it, all four aviators with their eyeballs. There was one plane up high, one plane at low. So we're talking two different vantage points, looking at the same object, unlimited visibility. It was a sunny day. And what they saw was a tic-tac shaped object with no obvious forms of propulsion, no wings, nothing that you would normally see with a jet propulsion missile or plane or drone. And furthermore, it was captured on video. When they landed onto the carrier strike group, another aviator took off named Chad Underwood. And he had a gun camera mechanism on his plane, and he took footage of it. Now, that footage is not that great. It's a little bit grainy. However, I would argue if you look at that tic-tac, that does not look like a plane to me. All of the corroboration points into it not being a plane. All of the aviators, all of the technicians, all of the radar operators, including Chief Operator Kevin Day, all of them from that incident have gone on record, or at least the ones that have gone on record, they've all been in unison that whatever that technology was surpasses all known technology. Does that prove that it comes from a non-human source? No, but it makes it plausible. So from what I've seen, this is probably the absolute best UFO historical event that we've ever had. However, I will tell you that multiple witnesses from that event said that the original video was higher resolution. And what we've been given by the government is lower resolution and therefore not quite as impressive. I really wish the United States government would have given this slightly higher resolution version so that we could have a clear evidence on what exactly we were dealing with back then that most likely does not, in my opinion, does not come from China, does not come from Russia, but comes from something else.
The thing is, it's a very appealing idea, isn't it? Because for the same reason that people are religious, we like to believe in a higher power or a different power or just something exciting that we're not entirely alone. Do you, in your research, try to guard against, for example, that cognitive bias, that desire to see something that might, I mean, as you say, you think it's not Russian or Chinese, but it could be. And if you don't know what it is, surely that's the first place you'd look, like, okay, well, then maybe it is something Chinese or Russian or something and not alien.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You always have to guard against confirmation bias, and I would never rule out that it's Chinese or Russian. It could be. I would argue it's unlikely for a few factors. For one factor, I would argue that if that technology existed all the way back in 2004, we would start seeing it show up in industry, in my opinion. I think it's unlikely that those that have that capability would hold it back and leave all that money off the table. I think we would see it, whether we would see it in the theater of war or we would see it in other manifestations. I mean, if China, let's just say China, if China actually had that kind of capability, I hate to say it, but I think they would have invaded Taiwan yesterday. So that's one of the reasons I'm not convinced it's Chinese technology. Another reason is that 2004 was not the first moment in history that we started seeing these kind of objects, tic-tac shaped objects. These go back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Patterns have emerged over the decades of credible witnesses, corroborated UFO events, of people saying they're seeing the same shapes over and over again, doing the same kind of flight maneuvers that don't comport with how airplanes fly. So I think the evidence is very compelling that it's likely that the most extreme manifestations of UAP doing extreme maneuvering without wings or obvious forms of propulsion, I think it's likely, it's just my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think it's likely that we're actually dealing with non-human intelligence.
And then this would just be speculation, of course, but who are these aliens that have traveled vast distances that we thought were impossible physically to travel? So they've come all the way here, and with their amazing technology that we can't, and they're just sort of just buzzing about every now and then in the sky and stuff. What are they doing?
It's a great question. Well, the one thing I'd say is that it's a very old universe. So they actually could get here physically if they traveled for a long enough time. Because if you're going like the space shuttle, goes like 20,000 miles an hour. You go 20,000 miles an hour over decades and decades and decades, they could be probes. They could be self-replicating probes that have no biological creatures inside them. So even with the technology we know about, things from light years away could still get here because it's a very old universe. They could have been traveling for hundreds of years. And also, there's also the proposition that they don't come from other planets, that they're native to the Earth, that maybe they live under our oceans, or they live in some sort of shadow biome, if you will. And maybe they live in a different kind of we live in the present moment, but maybe the way they live is more complicated than the present moment. Another, I don't want to say another dimension because I don't even know what that means, but another form of reality, but still native to the Earth. There's a lot of possibilities on the table, and the extraterrestrial hypothesis, where they come from other planets, is only one of them. As to why they would come from other planets to here, I guess the same reason in 100 or 500 years, if we ever develop the capability to travel interstellar distances, we'll be doing the same thing. We'll be going to other planets because the human mind is very inquiring, and we study whales, we study ants, we study the animal kingdom, we study physics, and it's just as possible that other intelligences in other parts of the universe would want to come here and look at what our reality is all about to further their scientific understanding of the vast universe.
Oh, I just had like a funny thought, like it's us from another, I guess like
That's
Interstellar.
another hypothesis. Time
Yeah,
travelers is.
Oh, I like that one. So that's interesting. And I can also imagine us, as you say, sending out those kinds of probes, and maybe in what we would consider to be, by our calculations, billions of years' time or millions of years' time, there's some other planet off really far away in another galaxy that's getting these probes from us, and we're long extinct by that point, and they're having a little Skype conversation or Zoom conversation going, oh, what are they? And the government's not telling us, and it was just us guys.
Exactly.
We were around for couple 100,000 years and then we were gone. I don't know, man. What an exciting idea! But there are leaks.
This is why the lack of conspiracy upsets me so much, because I'm not going to tell you I know what this is. It could be China, it could be Russia, but it also could be a lot weirder. And that's why whatever data the United States government has, they need to start sharing it so that our scientific community can take a look, and so we can have a broader conversation and objectively look at the data and try to understand our universe better. Like, for example, if the United States government had one crystal clear video of a flying saucer with absolutely no obvious forms of propulsion, doing right angle turns, stopping on a dime, why not share that with the public? Then we could have a new conversation. But by the way, there are new scientific efforts looking into UAP, and that is largely the result of the government's change in stance on UAP. Because for the longest time, the U.S. government was saying nothing to see here. They've literally changed their stance. They've done a 180. So now we have, for example, Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University. He initiated a program called the Galileo Project, and he is developing telescopes with algorithms so that it filters out birds and stuff like that, but looks for truly anomalous stuff, going to maybe hot spots where UFOs are known to appear often. So he's literally starting to, quote unquote, look through the telescope, if you will. And because ultimately we've never really had a long-term systematic scientific investigation into this enigma. So anyone that says it's extremely unlikely that we're being visited by non-human intelligence, to me, is being slightly disingenuous. We cannot proclaim it's extremely unlikely until the scientific method actually starts to apply to this mystery. And that has not happened yet. And it's starting to happen with people like Harvard scientist Avi Loeb. It's starting to happen with outfits like UAPX and others. So after that happens over decades potentially, and then we find nothing, then people can proclaim it's highly unlikely. But you cannot possibly proclaim it's highly unlikely when the scientific method hasn't even been invested into researching this enigma.
Here's my little qualm with this. It's just that, of course, outside of the States, there are many other countries, many large countries where, big skies and things. And of course, there are reports of UFOs all over the place. I went to a village called Capilla del Monte in Argentina, where they all believe in aliens. And it's like this alien town. We went looking for aliens together and all that stuff. But To say, okay, so the government in the US has been hiding this. Okay, they've been hiding it for a century. But has every single other government in that time, in every other country for 100 years, all conspired to hide anything that they've seen in their skies and not looked into it scientifically? That's what seems unreasonable to me.
Yeah, that's a fair rebuttal. So what I would say to that is I would say that there must be something built into our psychology when it comes to people in power that do not want to broach this. Maybe think of it this way. Let's say you're the head of the Air Force or the head of NORAD or whatever, and you have scientific data showing that you can't defend yourself. There's something out there that can infiltrate highly restricted military airspace with impunity. Are you going to be motivated to broach that? Are you going to be motivated to reveal to the public that, hey, guess what? I have some news for you. There's technologies out there. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what their agenda is. And oh, by the way, they're known to meddle with our nuclear infrastructure, which is part of the historical record. You can go ahead and read Robert Hastings' books, UFO and Nukes. There have been many corroborated events with personnel, guards, and those that are trusted to actually launch these nuclear ICBMs going back to the 60s, 50s, 70s, and up until today, where they report UAP have come over these installations, surveilled these installations, and in certain instances, it's been reported they've actually turned them on, turned them off. Now, if that's actually happening, that may be a big reason governments don't want to touch this. They do not want to have to tell the public that, oh, not only do we have forensic proof that there are unexplained technologies out there, but by the way, guess what? They're also interested in our nuclear technologies. I would argue that people in power are psychologically not motivated to go there, and therefore that would be a motivation to keep it secret. Now, to your question of how has that not leaked out, or another, I'll give you another rebuttal. I've heard there's many good rebuttals. There's security cameras all over the place. There's billions of people with smartphones, right? Why have they not picked these up just from happenstance? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. But what you have to keep in mind, and which you cannot ignore, is that what happens when what you're dealing with is thousands of times smarter than you. We cannot make assumptions about how these intelligence would operate. Would they want to be caught on camera? Would they want to be studied? Maybe they see our biosphere as fascinating, and they don't want to nudge the natural order of things. They want to see how we function without this paradigm shift. Now, the rebuttal to that would be, okay, but how is the government getting the forensic proof, even if the public and private organizations are not? And my answer to that would be, I don't know, but that's where the evidence points. I think we have to be careful about making assumptions about the motivations of something we don't even understand. It might have developed on another planet through its own unique evolution because of the temperatures and the foods and all of that. I don't know, but whatever we might be dealing with might be thousands of times more intelligent than us. And so, if it has decided that it wants to only have our civilization recognize it to a certain extent, I think with artificial intelligence, it could potentially pull that off. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is, for the past 70 years, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of witnesses all over the world reporting the same kind of shapes, whether it's saucer shaped, triangular shaped. We have corroborated UFO events. We have FOIA documents that have been acquired through the Freedom of Information Act, where government documents report that government insiders take this very seriously. And now we have a situation where the American government has changed their tune on this. Why would they do that? If I was in the government, I would just keep denying it. I wouldn't be like, okay, by the way, we weren't completely honest with you. You got to recall, there was a UFO report that came out in June. I think it was June 25th, 2021. And if you read that report, it says that explicitly says that 18 incidences show technologies that stay stationary in the wind, have kinds of propulsions that don't make sense, doesn't show obvious means of propulsion. That's corroborated by for example, the USS Nimitz UFO event series. So I'm not saying skepticism on this doesn't make sense, because it does. And we don't have scientific proof. But what I am saying is, you really have to think in a nuanced way, because you're not dealing with something that you can really compare to something else. You're dealing with something, quite frankly, that could be very alien.
It's complicated, isn't it? And I don't deny that there's so much we don't know about, and to suggest we did know everything would be profoundly arrogant, and would be mad to ignore it. And I can imagine right now, again, I'm imagining this being in a movie about the sort of an apocalypse or whatever, and you're the truth sayer, and we're all going, oh yeah, but what about this and that? And then turns out you're right, but it's too late. You've just been gobbled up by an alien. But I mean, the thing is, that is my sticking point. It is like I can't believe that Trump wouldn't have come out with it by now, especially he's no longer president. I feel like he would have started telling everyone just because it would have given him popularity.
Well, Barack Obama did. Barack Obama did. Barack Obama
Yeah.
explicitly says we have footage and records of objects maneuvering in ways that are not easily understand. Now, the thing is, they may have kept it secret during the Cold War. If you recall, during the Cold War, nuclear exchange was not outlandish. So think about it. You're a government official. You're a military official. Do you really want to, in addition to the proposition that we're gonna eradicate the world because of the nuclear exchange? Oh, and by the way, there's aliens. And oh, and by the way, they're messing with our nukes. So what might have happened is during the Cold War, they came to the decision to keep this hush hush because we're already dealing with the proposition of a nuclear exchange with Russia. We don't want to add this to the table and freak everybody out. What might have happened is the secrecy became so institutionalized that once the Cold War started to wear off a little bit, the truth never came out. What I think's happening, and I could be wrong, I think the truth's coming out now. And I think, though I could be wrong, within the coming years, you will see more transparency and more data that's more compelling than we've seen up to this point.
Very exciting. I would love that. Wake up one day,
but
reading
you know
the
what?
paper.
Let me just say one last thing. One thing we can unite on, whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or somewhere in between, which I think is where I'm at. I'm not 100%. I would never be. I'd have to see the smoking gun evidence.
You're
but
pretty far along.
I'm over
between.
50%. I'm over 50%. I'm over 50%, but I would not say I'm 100% because I don't have the smoking gun evidence. I don't feel like I need to be explicit and say, well, I'm 90% or I'm 80, I'm over 50%, and my mind changes from day to day. But what I wanted to, so you're right, I'm not quite in the middle, I'm above the middle, but I'm not at 99% either. I wouldn't go that far because I know that I have a fallible mind and I could be wrong. But what I wanted to say is that we can all unite, whether you're a staunch, a knee-jerk skeptic or a rabid believer, we can all unite in wanting greater transparency from our governments. That we can all agree on, and that's the common ground we have. And I think that's what we should really push as a community.
You're right. And on that note, we're running out of time. So just tell us, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for telling us all about this, and tell us where people can come and find you.
Yes, if you go to YouTube, just search Post Disclosure World, and I'll pop right up. That's my channel.
Oh, well, go and check that out. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, and have a lovely day.
Thank you. You as well. I appreciate it.